Okay, let's try that again. So, what I had said earlier was that we have to change a little bit the way we do this class, because it was just as bad for me last week as it was for y'all going through those 60 slides. So, what I'm going to do today is I figured that we're going to break up the class a little bit more, and specifically today, I think we're going to do first we're going to discuss the homework from last time. Thought it'd be a good idea. I hope those researching those definitions was really just to try to get your mind in the right place, and I just picked a few of the definitions, so I'd hope that you got some of the good, put some good thought into it to try to start getting a feel for what this class is about. And then I thought what we would do is go through how we're going to do quizzes and exams. So what I've been thinking about is not doing exams, but what we're going to do is more small quizzes. And I was trying to put one together on Canvas before this class, and what I'm thinking about doing is that huge deck of slides that we went through last time, we're basically carving those up into chunks. And basically I'm going to give you quizzes over chunks of each one. So like the first quiz, like when I get it done, maybe later tonight or tomorrow, it'll just be due before class next week. And you'll get, the way I'm setting it up is you'll get 1 or 2 chances to basically do the quiz. They're going to be true, false, multiple choice, maybe a couple essay questions depending on how I feel that day, or we'll see how it goes. And what else am I going to do there? Yeah, so some will be at home and some will be in class. You know, I thought maybe it might be a good idea to maybe have some of the quizzes in class. We could actually talk about them after you do them. Because I really want the class to focus on the project. So in the class today too, I was hoping we'd have it full like last week. But what we're going to try to do is use part of the class today to actually work on the project. And I'm going to go through the details because last time, you know, I introduced you to all the pieces that I wanted. But I really want you to know exactly what we're looking for, what's actually going to provide value. And I think you're going to get a whole lot of insight in the way just things are done in general when you actually go get a job. So that's, since I've been doing this for a really long time from a work perspective, I'm trying to pull it in. And I think from a research perspective, there's a few folks that wanted it to be an 8,000 level class. I've added some components to it, I think, so the class could almost be both. But anyway, I'm still working through some of that. Let's see. So you can kind of see how I broke it up there. I just broke it up into like 50, there's about 60 something slides. So we'll do the quizzes that way. And they should be anywhere from 10 to 15 questions. They won't really be that bad. And if you have the slides, you'll be able to figure it out. I just want you to think through the answers, and that's how I'm trying to make up the questions. You know, they're not there to trick you or anything like that. It's there just to make sure that you think through the answers. So then what we're going to do is, so it looks like all my hyperlinks I put in are not going to work well with my distance mouse. So I'm going to have to keep coming back here and selecting this stuff. So let's go back. We're going to go back through, I guess. Any questions on any of that? Did all that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Okay, let's go. We'll just have to do this. And beautiful. Why is it not doing it? All right, I have to take it out of that. Let's do it this way. Good job. It worked yesterday. All right. Okay. You can't see that though, unless I put it in the mode. Oh my God, that's really going to be annoying. All right. I have to do it the old-fashioned way then. All right. So the idea was to go this a little bit more quickly, but it's not going to work that way. So some reason the hyperlinks aren't working. So one of the things that was important last week was, right, that we got kind of a feel for humans for a really long time want help. And they want to build these systems that can actually help them in a lot of different ways. It's not any more than that. So these are the brief messages that we were trying to convey last week. I knew I should have cut and pasted them. Okay, let's see if I can just memorize it. All right. So you remember the slide where we talked about the knowledge and context challenges, right? Where the human brain only has 5 to 9 things that it can remember, about how Copernicus basically fudged a lot of his numbers. He was a little bit overconfident. So there's lots of human-related types of things, right, that cause us to have real problems when we make decisions. Well, if we're the ones building these AI systems, the last thing we want is build those same problems, right, into the system. So that was pretty much the idea behind that slide. There was also a bunch of other things that are important on those sets of slides. So let me actually go back to those because I think those actually go for a while. Wrong one. This one. All right, so we talked about that quote, right? That talks about how information has no value until you actually think about the topic. So the thought is, the thing that I want you to think about there is that all the books, all the things that have been written down, all the tacit information that are, and explicit information that's put in the books that hasn't been experienced in the past, none of that has any value unless you have a specific reason to want to go look at that information and do something with it. It's really important because when you're trying to set up a database and you don't care about any of the data, do any of them have any weights at that point? Not to you. They did to somebody else maybe for another reason. And that's basically the idea. That's why the weighting in your project is going to be really key, because you're gonna want to find out and pick the right weighting system for whatever domain you create your project for. In biology, if I know that protein in the nucleus has a relationship to something else in the cell, as a biologist, I'm going to know that much better than if I'm a computer scientist I have to read a bunch of things and figure things out. Those domain experts know those weighting systems. Well, when you build an AI that has very specific objectives, you have to figure out, what is it that I'm doing, why am I doing it, and how important are the different types of things potentially that that AI is going to come into contact with. How important are those? So all those relationships and knowledge in your AI, they're going to evolve over time, the same way they do in the minds of humans. And remember that the information is fuzzy. It's not explicit. It's very fuzzy and very ambiguous. So you're going to have to figure out how to deal with some of those problems. And one of the things we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, if we get to it, we're going to talk about complexity. One of the things I noticed, and we can hit it, I guess, when we get to your homework, but of all of the questions, that was really one of the ones that seemed to be kind of all over the place. Everybody else answered, you know, there was a few that didn't turn them in, but the ones that you did, you know, everybody did a pretty fantastic job of trying to put all those definitions in your own words. But complexity was one that was just, everybody had different answers for. And there's a reason for that. It's because it is very vague. It is very, how do you define that, right? So, but there are some really smart folks, a lot smarter than me and probably a lot of us, that figured this out a long time ago, and they do some really amazing things with it. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. Any questions on any of that? Is there any questions on the homework? It was pretty straightforward, I think, but on any of the definitions? Okay, where it is. This is going to be really great. Okay. So we also talked about some of the big challenges with AI itself, not just the human decision-making problems, but we talked about the high volume, the velocity of the data, right? How it flows through your system. Those are all things that you're going to have to think about in your project. How quickly does the data go through? Am I going to be able to process it? Do I have to process it in parallel? Do I have to have multiple processes running? Does it have to be? Do I have to cache some data to allow the processing to occur? I mean, those are all kinds of things that you're going to have to think about in your design when you're building that. Or designing it. Sorry. Okay, the other big problem is that since these systems are going to have to remember all of the data that it senses, or potentially remember it, depending on whether you throw information away because it's not part of the objectives of that AI. Those are all things you have to think about. That's all part of what we call the knowledge economy of the system. Because just like brains, the systems also have their obvious limited resources, and you have to figure out what makes the most sense, especially if I'm trying to store everything. Because we don't build systems today that remember what they do. So if they do remember what they do, we have to figure out how to manage that knowledge somehow. So you're going to have components in there that are going to have to, as part of your design, that are going to have to manage that. And I'll be looking for some of that, you know, in the designs themselves. Okay, this one I have to go back to. So last week, it looked like I needed to do a little bit of a better job explaining this. So I added a few additional characteristics so that you could kind of get a little bit more of a feel as to the differences, and more in the terms of the characteristics of the different types of AI. So on the left, AI 1.0 is a description of how we historically have thought about AI and the way it's been approached. And what's key there, what the new things in green there, right, is about the whole concept of traditional AI has been about prediction, creating systems, being able to sift through mounds of data, trying to make sense out of that information. Bless you. Trying to make sense out of that information and thinking about things probabilistically. Weighting things arbitrarily and then going back through them again and again and again. And maybe if you're lucky, you get the right weights that you want, right? Inherent problems with that is, well, if you give it a lot of bad data, you just trained it really badly. So anyway, those are the types of things. They do more inductive reasoning, right? Where the data comes in, it's a certain bound, right? That's an inductive process. So what I call true AI, you know, if it ever can learn on its own, is more abductive in its reasoning. And we'll get through, there's a whole section there we didn't get to last week about reasoning in general. But it's about thinking about all the things that I don't know. How do I deal with those? You didn't give me data for that. How do I think about that? Well, you have to build those types of those types of components into a system in order to be able to do that. And just like last week, I'm going to post all these slides. They're all going to be up on Canvas. Now that every week I learn how to use it a little bit better than the week before. So, so the one thing that I thought about last week when I was listening to some of the answers and some of the questions and things and some of the why AI answers was, so you know, and I'll pull it up here in just a minute. But do you remember that autonomic information continuum? Well, the way I kind of thought about the way traditional AI has been is it's pretty much a large portion of the things from the very left to across the center to the part that says semi-autonomous and some autonomy to some degree. That's where all the science has been. That's where all the engineering has been going. You know, we build UAVs today, right, that can fly on their own, but they can't put fuel in themselves. I mean, they can't clean themselves. There's all different types of things that they can't do. So they're semi-autonomous. So that's kind of where we're at. So that last section of that self-learning, being able to do things in deep space or deep underwater where humans can't go, or like we talked about at the nuclear power plants, trying to clean up, you know, the Fukushima reactor after the tidal wave, all those types of things, we have to be able to deal with that. And we have to do that with not just predictable, you know, data logic for things that we do know. We have to put those other components and systems in place to deal with things in an abductive way. And there's something called possibilistic logic that's a little bit different from probabilistic logic that we'll do in another class as well. But that's how do you deal with those possibilities? How do you deal with the hypotheses? How do you deal with those possibilities differently? How can you build something that can create its own hypotheses and maybe work its way through it? That's what we're going to work through. And there are some kind of simple things, and then there's things that are a little bit harder to do. So think of AI as a continuum, okay? It's not like that, you know, there's all this new way that's perfect and there's old way that's not. All those other pieces have to be in place too, right? All the great things we already know have to be able to, the system has to be able to deal with those as well as deal with the things that it does not know. So they all apply. So I wanted to try to make that clear. It's not like, well, we did it this way and that's not the way to do it. That's not true. It's about, they glue together very nicely. So I think I already talked about that last bullet. So to the far right, we have the autonomous self-learning, and to the left, we have more of the expert systems where, you know, that can do decision support, they can do speech recognition, they can do really great things that learn from content that's given, you know, good data that's given to them. So any questions there before I go on? Any more questions on that slide? Okay, so hopefully I cleared that up a little bit more from last week. We talked about that. So we talked about the multidisciplinary engineering. And we talked about the importance of that, about being able to rapidly be able to understand different domains, ourselves as engineers, but then also be able to build components into the systems to be able to learn that type of information as well. If you have an AI that's supposed to deal with one thing and then it has to deal with another, how, like biology or chemistry, how does it learn that domain? And there are ways to do that. Okay. Okay. That's going to be really arduous. Apologize for that, folks. That's what you get when you use two different machines. It killed the hyperlinks on the other machine when I finally took it off. So, trying to remember now what I wanted to tell you guys on some of these. So one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the difference between the subtleties between presentation and representation. So in all the systems that we use, things are presented, information is presented to us. So some people misinterpret that as representation, right? But it's really, that is how the individual that knew about the data decided to present it to you. The representation of that content under the covers in the database is very different, isn't it? So representation is about how the content is put together under the covers, how the relationships are put together. The presentation is very different from that, and they are two completely independent things. So you need to remember that, because we mess that up all the time. Even in our engineering world, we don't think about it correctly. So what happens a lot of times is, so have you had big classes in big data, or where you've done a lot of indexing of data? Have you had any classes with any of that? Some? So have you had database design? Okay. All right. So have you done it? Have you done database design on Hadoop clusters, or on not on just disk without any file systems? Anything like that? Just dealing with straight pointers and things like that? Have you done any of that? Okay. All right. So a lot databases. Do you know what indexing is inside of, like, say, an Oracle or something, right? You know that, right? Okay. So those indexes that are created, right, are basically just pointers to stuff, right? And so what happens is that when we represent that content under the covers, that's done very differently, right? Than they're done. Last week we talked about the fact that we use the same kind of relational algebra from the 1970s in the databases we use today. It hasn't changed. But yet we want to do multi-dimensional things with flat 2- and 3-dimensional databases. And so what a lot of people believe is that magically, if I just index across 10 different types of data, I have created a multi-dimensional solution. No, you didn't. You basically just allowed yourself to get at content really fast. That's all you've done. It's not, you haven't, use any kind of Riemannian manifolds or any kind of special math that's folding space and time. There's no multi-dimensional thing going on there at all. It's multi-dimensional in the concept that I've indexed across 10 things that all are related to one another, therefore I can go find it really fast. That is all that has been done. But that's representation. That's how all the data is represented. And you need to think about it that way, very differently than the way it's presented. There'll be part of one of the classes where we'll go into something called multidimensional visualization, which is actually really, really cool stuff. So, and that's where what it does is it takes the representation of the content and it flips it into 2D and 3D so it can be presented to you, even though all of the math that's being done under the covers is all very multidimensional, geometrically and mathematically. Okay? So you just gonna have to take my word for it. So the other thing that's really important about reasoning in general is that reasoning is that one piece, right? It enables that AI to fill in all the skeletons, right? It fill in that skeleton with all the information as it grows over time. So reasoning is one of the really important things that we need to have. So So beyond the aspects of the brain function, there are really 3 different theories of human reasoning. This is what's called distributed reasoning, collaborative reasoning, and modularity. So it's about breaking content up into modules. It's about thinking of things in a distributed way. And it's about collaborating across all of that distributed data. How do you do that? So as an example, a lot of the data centers like Google today, if you do a query on Google, you're doing it on a server that's in Dallas. But they've replicated that data across a bazillion servers all over the country, right? It's very different. When replicating content across so that you can get to everything is very different from, I have data A in one location, data B in another location, data C in another location, and you have the intelligence under the covers to be able to deal with that data in a distributed way. So it's distributed, it's modular, and it's collaborative. Well, your brain works that way too, even though it's all inside your skull. All of those different pieces inside your brain all work together in a collaborative, distributed, and very modular way for you to be able to pull all this content together. So that's really important to understand too. I put these together really late last night too, so I have to go back through them a little bit since they're not in order now in my head. Okay, so here we go. So we talked earlier a little bit about the inductive reasoning differences from deductive reasoning. So in inductive logical reasoning, you're taking something that has already been concluded and you're trying to evaluate against it, right, to come to to come to some kind of general conclusion. So the example there is, well, zebras at the zoo have stripes. That's a conclusion. We already know that. Therefore, all zebras have stripes. So that is an example of inductive reasoning. And deductive reasoning, aka Sherlock Holmes deduction type reasoning, it's about applying general principles that you already know. In Sherlock's case, he has a ton of things in his head that he already knows. Therefore, his deductive reasoning is really good. Obviously, it's a lot. It's not quite as he does things a lot harder than this. So, apples are fruits. Granny Smith is an apple. Therefore, Granny Smith is a fruit. Right? Those are simple deductive types of reasoning, and they're a little bit different. So, now. The important one is the one that I talked about earlier, is the abductive reasoning, and basically that allows for the system to be able to deal with explanatory hypothesis generation. So in other words, have the system, it can generate its own hypotheses and find the simplest answer. You've heard of Occam's razor, you've seen movies about it, what have you. It's the same way that we do it. We look at a whole pile of information all at once. And we try to very rapidly sift through all that information to try to figure out what is the simplest answer, right? Last week it was really hot, right? Simplest answer, AC is not working, or it's turned off. But I mean, the point is, a system has to be able to do that. How do you teach a system to pick that answer, right? To understand those type of things? Well, you do it partially with weighting and other types of mechanisms. All right, any questions there? You guys are really quiet today. All right. So other types of reasoning. Cause and effect, right? You see a cause, you need to produce some type of effect from understanding it. Relating things to previous situations that you have in previous experiences that you have in your mind. Some of these are real common sense, but they're all different types of reasoning. Comparative reasoning, when you compare two things to one another. The one that we're the most familiar with there, number 4, is if-then reasoning, because we do it every day. You weight pros and cons. Those are different types of reasoning mechanisms that you might build into your system. Let's see here. You reason a lot of times by analogies. How many systems do you know that can actually make analogies? So that actually might be pretty interesting, AI project. Okay. Okay. So we've already talked about induction and abduction. Have you guys had classes in genetic algorithms? Only if you had even in the machine learning class? Did anybody in here have the machine learning class? Or a couple last week? Okay. So genetic algorithms, what they do is they actually generate populations of these different types of hypotheses. And this dialectic argument Tolman structure that you see there, what it basically does is it breaks up arguments into sections. And based on how you put the argument together, its objective was to how to help you win arguments by putting the right pieces in the right places. That's what the Tolman structure basically was trying to describe. But when you're dealing with hypotheses, you're trying to have a system deal with concepts. Have you had any text analysis classes? Anything like that at all? Where you analyze like natural language processing or anything like that? No? Okay. All right. But think about this, right? We all had those really horrible grammar classes in high school, right? I had them. I didn't like them, but when you had to break a sentence up into different components, right? Each of those pieces, there were nouns and verbs, and there were subjects, and there were those subjects were really important, and you tried to carve those out. Well, if I'm trying to take a document as an example, which is a very real life case, and I'm an AI, not a human, how do I parse that entire document and tell you what it's about? So that's the idea. If you understand how to break, if you understand, so natural language processing in 10 seconds is, if you understand the structure of language, and there's a lot of them, right? Anywhere from 3 to 10,000 languages, believe it or not, spoken. You'd be surprised. Some of them have been lost, but there's lots of languages out there. Some are only spoken and not written, and vice versa. But the point is, if you know the structure of language and you understand how to build concepts and you know how to weight and you understand how to parse things in a document, you can actually go through and to some level of accuracy systematically obtain what that document's about. It may not be 100%, but you can create a pretty good idea of what it's about. So that's what abductive reasoning helps you do. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, and this is just an example, right? There's a lot of different, we've not gone into any natural language processing things yet, and we'll do that in another class. But the Tolman structure basically breaks up, its modularity is, and it builds up like it has a claim, it has grounds, it has warrants and backing, it has additional qualifiers. It also has a section about rebuttals where you would come up with all of the different types of rebuttals that you would have if someone was giving you an argument so that you could rebut each one. It has all those pieces, and essentially I just wanted to give you that as an example so you can understand how you have to really understand the system. The AI has to understand concepts. Okay, so that was reasoning. So the other thing that we learned about last week so this isn't the slide I wanted, but that's okay, it'll do. We learned about the cognitive knowledge creation process. So this is the process that essentially is kind of formalized and written down that has been researched by psychologists for 100 years, maybe even more, in terms of how humans think. How we talked about last week about how we discover information, how we decompose it. It's one of the first things that we do. How we compare and contrast things to try to, this all happens in milliseconds. But these are the types of processes that come into play. And then all of that content and that knowledge that we've gained becomes normalized in our heads, and it becomes recursive in the way that it becomes iterative, and it's a feedback loop into discovery all over again when we have our next encounter or activity of something that we have to perform. So, the key there was understanding that that's a data flow between those different components. So if you have the components in your system that can perform those normal human-like functions, realize that out of each one of those processes, there's information that's stored, right? When you collected the data, you remembered, well, where did I collect it? What did I collect? What time did I collect it? All of that is all context for that knowledge you brought in. But you go to the second stage, right? You're decomposing it, right? When you've decomposed it, you want to remember, how you decomposed it, why you decomposed it the way you did. Was there any reasoning in there? Through each of those processes, you're going to store off pieces of information that are important to you. Okay. The other thing we learned about is I put up a slide that had a kind of a generic architecture for an artificial cognitive neural framework that had the mediator in the middle. It had, potentially a human interface that was going through some kind of auditory interface where the data was being collected. And so I wanted you to, I have this out. Actually, I'll pull this up now. I kind of drew this up, but I'll show it to you. It's going to show it to you later. So this is kind of so I built this slide, and we'll hit it again a little bit later, but if you think about the AI, I wanted you to conceptualize what this AI system looks like, right? It's a simple block diagram here, right? You've got an AI system. It's got a brain called an artificial cognitive neural framework. You have storage, right? You have a real system, just like the kind of things that you're used to seeing. The difference is that you're building pieces in it that are very different from pieces that you've built in the systems before. And that's really the difference. And how much you put in it or how little you put in it a lot of times has to do with your objectives. Why are you building this AI? What is it for? Right? There's different levels, right? You're not going to, at the end of the class, right, you're going to walk into an employer on a resume and say, hey, I built a self-learning robot. That's not right. That's not what we're doing, right? You're learning the constructs for potentially doing some of those things, but you're using those as building blocks. But it's modular enough so that you can add other components to it over time. So we're learning some of the pieces, and you might even build a very primitive one. So one of the things that's going to happen probably on the right now, it's tentatively on the 28th of February, is I got the computer science department to fly down a good friend of mine who I think I told you about it last week, who builds these little AI bugs. And they have a couple of neurons that they're built with, and they're actually really cool. And he's going to give a seminar here, and that's going to be our class for that day. But it's going to be a really cool class. So you can actually see all this stuff that I'm showing you that looks like a bunch of theory and slides and words on paper or on digital paper, actually in action. Okay, so this is basically what we're talking about. So, and we'll hit the slide again later when we start talking about the project. Okay, so let me find those slides. Okay, so one of the things we talked about that's in that component set, right, are the memory systems, right? So last week we talked about the fact that there are different types of memory systems right? There's the sensory memory, right? There's all the raw data that comes in that we got to do something with. That is the stuff that has the highest volume, comes in really fast, and is the hardest to process, okay? Well, not hard from the sense that it's hard to hard to understand a lot of times, even though that can be the case as well. But in that, it's just very voluminous. If I have to, if a byte is still 8 bits and I have to have a system that brings in 30 frames a second video off of a sensor, I got to have something in place that can understand all that stuff. But if I'm building something that doesn't really, let's say all it's doing is collecting that data and storing it. I mean, it's not really AI, but it's doing a really simple process. I can probably make it do that, right? But if I have to take that content in, try to understand it, break it apart, figure out what's inside of it. That's a lot harder to do. And so when you're dealing with these resources, knowledge economies, all the stuff that we're talking about, it's really important to understand the difference between the raw sensory type memory and the types of thing that you're building into the system, whether the brains, which is the short-term memory, and the long-term memory, just as an example, right? Because remember, there's a lot of other types of memories potentially. And, and maybe all you need is a short-term and a long-term memory, but maybe, just maybe, you're doing something underwater, right? And you need some kind of subsonic storage. You're in different audio or visual domains. Maybe you need even specialized storage. Maybe you need to index your data very differently. Maybe you need to weight it very differently from what you do other data. Maybe your system has to be modular and dynamic enough to weight things differently no matter what different domain it is. You've had a lot of classes where you've dealt with XML. Do you know why they created XML? Can anybody give me a guess? Why it was created? The idea is, right, if I have a system and I send it a bunch of information, how does that system understand what I'm sending it? It doesn't have a clue what I'm sending it unless I have processing in there to do it. So somebody came up with a really great idea to create this hierarchical mechanism to tag things a certain way so that when I send it, he knows exactly what I'm telling him as soon as I send it to him if I can write software to process it. We like to put structure around things because we're humans, right? So when we try to generalize, so we'll create an entire XML structure for biology. Oh, but wait a minute. Next year, 20,000 new things, new inventions and things came out. Oh no, now I've got to go back to this XML and change it all up and put new software, right? It's job security for us, but it's really dumb, right? But it's the way that we've done things for a long time. Doesn't make it bad, it just makes it the way that we've done things before. But if you're going to have a system that can learn from information, it has to deal with the content that it has never seen before, right? Through the senses that it has. Visual, whatever, the best sensory perception that we could possibly build into it, right? Based on what modern technology has. So just kind of put that into perspective. So we talked about, so just some of the slight differences, right? Why does it matter if it's short-term or long-term memory? What we talked about last week was that long-term memory, right, is where you potentially want to put important things that you don't use all the time, but you need to get to them when you want them. And if you're managing knowledge economy, you can't put everything there, and you might have to throw some things away. So how do you know what to throw away? We always like to keep everything, right? Even if it's in our garage. We want to keep all of the data all the time. Don't always need it. You just need to know where it is. So short-term memory, though, is the place where we talked about the information domain, the temporary storage domain, knowledge domain, and then the knowledge store, the more the long-term. It's in that temporary, like in our prefrontal cortex, in our brain, where we do all that processing with all that short-term memory that we have, which over time shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks just because biologically, right, we can't remember as well as we get older. So, but short-term memory, long-term memory. They seem simple, but they're there for very specific reasons. So does that mean you got to have two different databases? No. It just means you need to understand the difference between short-term and long-term memory in your system, right? Okay. And so let's deal with this slide then. So, important questions to think about, right? How much should my AI remember? How much information, should it ingest all at one time? Does it need to ingest it all at one time? How much can I process and understand at the same time? Or do I need to process it all, cache it all, and understand a little bit later because I have other things I have to go do? How do I think about that? How do I do that? How much information do I actually have to do to solve the problem I was built to solve, right? How fast do I need to process the information so I survive, right? It's a really important thing, potentially, in terms of, if you build a $2 billion AI that goes out into outer space, I think you'd want it to survive at least for a short period of time, right? So, so you got to manage the memory, manage the learning, manage the decisions, manage the rules, manage the goals. All of those things are built into systems. They're not in systems we build today, but we need to build them in systems that are going to do these types of things. Because if we don't, what happens? No trust. No trust, you can't sell it, no one will use it, it'll break things, it'll destroy things, right? All those problems. So it's not that you can't solve the problem, it's just that there are a lot of things to think about. And if you build it, if you're smart about how you build the building blocks, you can build those things on top. If you understand the modularity, the distributed nature, and how things have to be collaborative. And there's a couple of research papers, I think if I think about it, I may forget. Sometimes pen and paper works really well. Okay. Any questions? I haven't been asking you that a lot. I don't want to put you to sleep, so if you have questions, feel free to ask. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Some people think there is, but I don't agree. So, okay. So we've gone through this now for an hour. What do you want to do? You want to have a quick break? Yes, no, maybe? Yeah, 10 minutes? No? I see some heads shaking. Let's just go ahead and do it. It's let's come back at 7:40. I think we'll still be out of here earlier anyway, because there's no need to force everything down to the last second. So I'm getting a little bit better at this. My second week. So any questions at all? Nothing? It's all good. All right. It was absolutely packed. Yeah, and it was really, really hot in here. So who are you? I'll try to remember your name. I told everybody I'm really bad. Matter of fact, that's another good AI project. Build an AI project for your professor so he can learn everybody's name. Okay? No, go ahead. Tyler. Last name? Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, there was the class is packed, but I heard from Dr. Larson that the last day for drop ads was Friday, so there may be one or two that are not in here. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to finalize the teams. I think I got uploaded, but it's hard for me to tell whether everybody got on a team. So those that didn't, well, even if they were on the distance learning guys, I'm going to need to have people working with those folks so that everybody gets on a team and starts working, because the one thing you're really going to want to start doing is start working on the project and start doling out, have your leader dole out the important information to the team in terms of who's going to do what. Okay. Hello.
Hey, I'm Fahim. We
Hey.
exchanged some emails.
Oh yes. How you doing?
Good, how are you? I'm actually at distance too, so I.
Oh, but did you have? Yeah, sure.
Last question about the team.
Yeah. So we were just talking about that.
Okay.
So we're on a quick break right now. So you came in at a perfect time.
Okay.
So we're trying to put together teams of 5. If there has to be 1 or 2 teams with 6, we'll do it.
Okay.
But I'd like to keep them at 5 if we can. But I know we don't have the right, the right number to divide, mod 5 it. So I think that's what we'll do. So I think I saw one team that had 4 potentially.
Okay.
But I think it's I'm going to go through in detail what the project today.
Okay.
In the class is one of the things I thought about doing,
Sure.
so that everybody knows exactly what to expect and when to expect it. I thought that'd be a good thing to do.
I was actually standing outside.
Okay.
You don't want to interrupt, but I'm also kind of in the middle of my work.
No problem.
But I felt like let me connect the first. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know the whole.
Yeah. The problem is there's no way for any of the class, and I told this to Dr. Larson, there's no way for you to tell who's distance and who's not.
Yes, exactly.
So are any of y'all team leaders in here on the teams? Oh, that's right, Ashley, you are. That's right. How many? You have 5 on your team?
Yes.
Okay. So so there's one of the team leads. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you at least get her information. Actually, shoot. Hang on. I'm logged in on Canvas on my phone. So hang on. I got it right here.
Yeah. But Canvas is also.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
These
But I'm learning it too. So
Okay.
yeah. Oh, hang on. I forgot to do this. So sorry, guys. Let's see, where is it? There it is. Okay. So let's see, team creation. Okay. So let me see who submitted. Okay. So we have. Okay, so one leader of one of the teams is Janie Pasco.
Okay.
You want to write this down?
I can just take a picture. And
Okay.
that'll be
Well, but I have to go through 3 different ones. It's
Oh,
not all
okay.
on one because everybody submitted them separately.
Yep.
So here, just write it down and then you can look at the email up on the site, okay?
Yeah. Let me, just type a message.
So Janie Pasco, Pascoe.
Good.
And Ashley, what is your last name?
Isles?
Isles.
Yes.
A-I?
Uh,
How do you spell it?
oh, ISLES.
Oh, okay.
My first initial.
I'll find you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The
All right.
team name wasn't my suggestion.
It's all good. You guys have to live with it for the semester, so it's y'all's name. You guys got to be proud of your name, and because actually what you're going to find out here pretty soon is that I'm going to pit all y'all against each other. So we're going to be going for best project, and that those teams will get the best team will get a few more points than some of the others added to their grade. So, but we'll figure that out. I'm going to tell you that here in just a minute.
If we both
Okay.
actually
Let me see. It's hard to. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's another team. Tangus Khan.
That would be the most horrifying.
So that's 3 teams. Let me see if I can figure out who one of the other ones was.
You're all 5 so far.
So I think he's on somebody else's team though. That doesn't seem right. Hang on. That's that one again. Did I do?
I can work with this and then if we
Okay.
find out the other one, because I don't want to interrupt the.
No, we're still good. We still have 7. We have 7 more minutes. You're perfectly fine. Okay, this is the other one. I'm pretty sure. Ah, they say they only have 4 members. I know I saw it earlier. I think she is the
Team lead.
Ming Xiao Tan. I think she's the one that they have 4 members now on that team. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's you.
Yeah, that's
Oh, so you only have 4 members?
correct.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
And
Number 5.
Stop by to make sure that I'm.
That was easy.
So that's good. So I'll get your information from. I should find also the email on.
Yeah,
Canvas.
it's there. It's
Okay.
there,
We
yeah.
have our my email is and we have a Skype group.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, yes.
All right, very good. I'll get you an email. I'll get you an email, and I'll give you my email also so we can start. Thank
Okay.
you very much. That
All
was
right,
great.
good. Yeah, that was worth the visit.
That
Yeah.
was worth the time.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. Let me just.
Oh, that's awesome.
One I love that. Definitely
Basically.
Does anybody know how that vending machine out there works with the drinks in it? That doesn't take cash? Yeah. Or credit cards? Okay. And the coffee doesn't work either. That's horrible. How are we going to have class without coffee or some water?
Ouch.
Eventually,
Okay, that coffee.
All right.
It's terrible, but it's still caffeine. Who said they really don't like coffee anyway, so Spanish.
Yep, no,
Spanish or Italian?
Italian.
Did you take the listening exam?
I got a 36. And so they still wanted me to go into like Spanish and 1.5, you know, like 2 with intensive review, which is a 5 credit hour class.
Yeah, I'm listening to this.
No, I don't want to take 2 specials in Spanish in one. Because I was going into it, I was like, oh, I can just like kind of do 4 other places in Spanish 1. And then I like started taking, I'm like, hey, I don't know any of this. I just like do my best, I guess. I got a 30. And since they're gonna do that, alright, I'd rather just start over and do that.
Italian. Close enough that she's still like.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just new, and yeah,
Should take
they,
Chinese.
some of them are closed. Yeah, honestly, that would be.
Okay. So while we're still on break, I'm just going to tell you all about this. You pass it around. It's also not a book you have to buy, but it's like a Bible to me. Okay, this is a great book. Okay, this is a fantastic book, and I promise you, you will enjoy it. I built some slides late last night from some of this, and I had to take this class too a long time ago, but it's a really cool book. And if you can get it, I don't know what it costs, but I'm sure it's not cheap. It's hard. But you might be able to get a downloaded copy for relatively cheap off of, I guess it's Oxford Press. But here, I'll pass it around. You guys can take a look at it. But that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. The citation is in the back of the slides from last week, though, too. So.
I tested out. I should have just. I'm so salty about that. I got like 6 points off of being able to test out of it. They're like, yeah, you have to take last semester. I was like,
You're that close.
oh, was that close?
Could you not just one take it?
Because I took Spanish, like intense Spanish during high school.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, you have to take this last semester. And I literally had the same textbook that I had in high school. No,
Dang.
such a waste of time.
Yeah, I'd be bitter too.
That was kind of
Because, so what Spanish? What class was it?
Oh, it was like the 4th semester. So
24, 2?
yeah,
Is that 4?
maybe something like that. Like a transcript of everything. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
It just sucks. 'Cause, like,
it was like if I wanted to minor, I would have to take that 2 classes.
yeah.
Oh.
You should just.
look like the minor. You're a native speaker. Go away.
You should
Just tap your mom. Oh no,
I
yeah,
don't think
everybody.
I don't think you can do that.
Dang, not if you're native.
Right. Because I have a friend who's native Japanese, and he just has to do these like business oriented Japanese courses here. And he's just like, I'm just thinking I didn't do like 3 of the minor. So.
They're not.
He's like, they're super easy.
Get away with not having it in class. I have to take like a culture class. You have to take a culture class. Because it's not just the language, it's like the culture and stuff. I mean, it's. Well, it wouldn't just be Mexican culture, it would be like Spanish, Argentinian, stuff like that. That's fun. And my cousin, do you know that Run with the Bulls I did? Yeah, my cousin did that. I saw him, he's like, yeah, I went to Spain and did that. It's like, it's kind of terrifying.
That's awesome.
Who are you? There's a guy there whose cousin went to Spain or something. He's Brazilian. He came back. Spain was like, Spain. He's like, what are you? You know, like a lot of them were born in Ecuador, so they went to the And so, only one of them speaks Spanish. Spanish is weird. But taking a look at this what was bad for using
Okay.
Oh, that's completely trash. And then you take the test and it's got like a really random vocabulary, like conversational. Okay. my translation in Spanish, and like I can pronounce it just fine, I understand it just fine. She really good, so the conversation was really good, and then my conjugations this time. Oh yeah.
All right. So we'll start back up, and one of the other things that we talked about last week was about sensing, and this is probably going to be one of the more important things, and probably one of the few things you actually take on in your AI projects, because it's going to be something you're actually going to have to do. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later when we get into all the exact details of what to expect for the preliminary design that's going to be right. So I don't want to spoil that yet. I'll tell you about that later. So the natural senses that we always think about, right? Hearing, smelling, seeing, tasting, touching, right? Are all things that we humans do. But AIs can do 1,000 times more, right? There's all types of chemical sensors, biological sensors. You know, they're making sensors out of the information from dogs' noses. You know, that can basically, that soldiers can wear on their arms and walk in the battle, and instantaneously it tells them, you know, what type of chemical is there. So some pretty fantastic things that are going on in all the fields, whether it's visual, hearing, auditory. You know, they have sensing now that detect direction. You know, 360 degrees hearing for pilots. You know, that are always looking straight ahead, that need to understand things behind them but can't. There's all kinds of really neat things out there, right, that are being done. So AIs can do that. AIs can use those types of systems, and I really want you guys to explore the types of sensors that might be really cool for you to use for your projects. Okay, try to pick something compelling. Figure out what the data is about. Try to figure out what you need to do to process it, and do the best you can to try to design it into your system. You know what I mean? You know, pick something that, you know, it's like knowledge economy. Right? You only have a finite amount of time, right? But try to pick something. That's why I only picked 2 different data sources. I figured everybody was going to pick text anyway, because that's the easiest one to parse and put in the system. But pick one that's out of your comfort zone, and try to do something really neat with it if it fits in with the objectives of what you're trying to build. So think about the types of sensors that are out there. Do a little bit of exploring. The types of you know, processing that you have to do with those sensors. Types of components, software components you have to have in your system to do the processing. How are you going to extract the information out of that data? How are you going to transform it? Or do you have to transform it? Is your AI smart enough? You know, do you just slice it and dice it and stuff it in your database? You guys need to figure out what you're going to do with that. So that question at the bottom, again, this is the slide from last week, so we're just reviewing this. What type of sensors exist today, and what type do you need for your project? Okay. Okay, and wow, all the way up there. Ha. Okay, and then this one to me is one of the really important slides from last week, because it really kind of explains the problem. Right, again, far right, self-learning. That's the piece that we're trying to push on in this class. From the almost fully autonomous to the self-learning is where we're trying to get to, where the ambiguity gets worse, the complexity gets worse, and the trust goes down. So we have to try to build a system that can deal with those problems. Okay. All right. Let's see, am I done with that? Yeah. Boom. Okay. So each week I'm going to kind of hit on, even though you're going to know in your groups and teams kind of sort of where you're at, but I want to kind of level set you every week. So we kind of feel what's going to be expected, where you're kind of at, and where you should be in the project development. So we don't get towards the middle or towards the end and you don't have what you need. Okay? So so we're working on creating those teams of 5 people. I think all of that is done. All right, so there's a couple of stragglers out there, and we'll figure that out over the next week. Like I said there, we've done a pretty good job of keeping it to 5 people, and depending on drop ads and all that, we'll figure out what happens. But it looks like there might be maybe one team that might have 6. Not sure if that's going to happen, but that's okay. I really, I'd like to get the leader of each of the teams to reach out to the folks that are on the distance learning, but I haven't figured out yet how to tell you, or how you, there's no way for you can, I talked to Dr. Larson, there's no way for you to see who the distance learning students are. Okay, so I have to figure that one out. I think I can actually see it through some weird way on Canvas from my view, and I can get that to the different leaders of the teams. But I'd like you to reach out to those distance learning folks, and so that if some of them are not on a team yet, they can be, because it's going to be harder for them to get hold of people in here. So start working on the projects yesterday. Okay. All right. I know you got a lot of other stuff to do too, but the idea for this class today was, if I can go through and explain exactly what you need, it'll make it a lot easier for you to figure out how to balance up how to carve up your work and give it out to the different people to go do, and how to bring it back together. Okay. So you guys all have your pretty much how you're going to do your infrastructure for your groups, and if not, there's no problems there. Or if there are any problems, I tell you what, are there any problems with figuring out any of the infrastructure pieces for your groups? All right, okay. So if there is, just let me know and we'll figure something out. I actually asked SMU for some money so they could actually, so if we needed to have, I mean, even if it's as simple as we try to come together sometime, or groups have to get together and they got to cram on the project to get stuff done, and they need a bunch of pizza and whatever else to do something. There's ways to do some of that if we need to do that. So we'll figure that out. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to work. We're going to do some of the project-related work in class. So what I would suggest for you all to do, I know that not everybody always brings their laptops. Most of you do. But if you talk to your teammates, it'd be a really good idea to bring them to class each time, just in case. Because we're gonna, for the folks that are here, and we're gonna do it today too, I'm gonna give you a chance after you know what you're gonna be doing, we're gonna help and let you guys actually work on some of it today. Because there are some things that you can do. Okay, so the last bullet on there is really important, right? If you have all your project infrastructure complete, what's really important is that the faster that you can, and it's going to change, right? You're going to iterate through it a few times. You know, certain people are good at some things and not others. That's normal project. You know, we deal with at work every single day. So carve it up, figure out who's good at what, give them a task to do it. If you think that it needs to then be taken over by someone, somebody's just going to have to work that, and you have to work through the leadership on your team to do that. But there's a lot of work to do. If you can start earlier, do. There's no reason why you couldn't start yesterday. There's no reason why you got to wait till class 3 to start. Do whatever you have to do. And if you need any help, let me know early. If there's any problems, I don't get. I get so many emails and text messages every day. A few more is not going to matter. So. And I will respond pretty quickly. So just let me know if you have any issues with anything. All right. So we get some details in here. So, all right. So you remember this really busy slide from last week. So just to reiterate the percentages, I'm sure you probably know it really well already, that each of the sections are about 20%, or they are exactly 20%. For the final design, the preliminary design, and the final presentations and demonstrations. So what I did in the next few slides is each of these sections that talk about the proposal document, the high-level design, and the final design, I went in detail to tell you what I want in those sections. Some of those I may still, in the final portions, I may still have to flesh out a little bit. They may change slightly, but we're going to work on that. I'll work on that probably later this week, because I don't want to wait. I don't want to get those finalized. I want to get those finalized as soon as possible. So what I'm going to give you, and it's already loaded, by the way, if you have access to Canvas right now from your laptops, there's a document that I loaded up into the assignment. It's a Word document. It's an actual entire research paper layout, which gives you all the formatting instructions, how long the abstract needs to be, what the font's got to look like, how many references potentially I want you to do, because you're going to be doing a little bit of research, or you might be, let's say you go explore sensors, and you find a couple of really cool papers that talk about these really neat sensors that might be great for your design project. Get the citations off of Google Scholar or wherever you get them. They're already indexed for you, for those of you who haven't used it before. Grab the citation and drop it into your bibliography in the back. So it's all in there already. The outline's kind of in there. You can change up the outline however you need to, but I'd like you to keep the main sections in there the way that they should be. It tells you how to format figures, and there's a reason why I did that. So if any of y'all ever have to write a research paper or a paper for a customer or anything that you do later, you'll know how to do it, because this is actually a real format for papers that get turned into conferences, for academic conferences and things like that. But it's outlined perfectly to allow you to describe your project in great detail, and has all those pieces there. So you'll have all that till at the end of the semester as well. Let's see here. It's probably better if I just do this on the detailed slides that I built. Okay. Okay, so the proposal document is going to be due. What I decided to do was, and it may change again, but we'll see how it works out. But originally I was planning on having some kind of an exam on the Tuesday before the spring break weekend, right? But I thought it'd be a really bad idea though is to give you time all the way through Friday or whenever before you go to get as much done on the preliminary design on the project before you go off on spring break. So we're not going to make that due until the Friday, even though we might have instead of that Tuesday when we have class. Okay. The abstract is a really key thing. It's a real key thing to understand how to write them, because you'll need it in the future, and it will help you in everything that you do. They have to be really concise. They got to represent exactly what you have in the rest of your document. They have to be really coherent. I mean, this is going to sound really silly, but there has to be a nice beginning, a middle, and an end. And the end should be what you're proposing to do. Right? It should describe very succinctly. And you can also look that up. There are ways to write really good abstracts. But it's really important that the abstract is in there well, because the expectation is if you have to do presentations at some point in time, it's really good if you have a good abstract, because that'll describe your project really well and very succinctly. Okay? The one thing that I still have to work on is basically figuring out how long I want the presentations to be when we do the presentations for the preliminary design, because I want them to be I want you to be selling your design to the rest of the class, right? So we're going to see, and each of the team members, not each of the team members. So each team will get to ask 1 or 2 questions of the team that's up here, so that everyone's participating in the other person's presentation of their design. So be thinking about that too, because I want you to. We want to try to see who's going to have the best project, and I'm going to give a few points more to the different teams, and it's going to be just scaled. It might be something like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 type of a thing in terms of the category, how many points you get onto your grade, depending on which one becomes the best project. And I haven't decided yet, but what I was thinking about doing is potentially realistically having everyone vote, and have my vote count too. So we'll figure out how that's going to work too. So we'll figure out how that's going to happen a little bit later, but that's one of the things I've been thinking about. Okay, so in the background section in that document, what needs to be in there are these types of things. A really succinct project description, your objectives, right? What were your objectives when creating this? Okay, let me put the back up a little bit and put it in perspective. When you do research doesn't always succeed. I mean, research is about doing research, and even if you fail, sometimes the failure is success because now you know what not to do. So the point is, that's why it's really important to describe your project, the kind of potential things you're going to look into, and see, because your conclusion might be, hey, this is a really bad idea to do this part of what we did. You might want to go do this, right? That doesn't make your project bad, it makes it even better because you've done some investigation and you've actually found some things. It's just as useful as something that was completely successful, okay? So don't be afraid to run into those type of things, go, oh my God, my project's gonna be horrible. No, okay, just think about that and include that. So very detailed project description. The objectives not only and scope of your project, but think a little bit about what your AI objectives are going to be. So I mean, these things can have sections and subsections depending on the level of detail that you want to provide. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Scope your project, right? Do your formalization, right, of your project. Scope it out, and see, did I put it on this slide? No. So you're gonna, it's on the next slide, but it talks about providing a project schedule. I really want you to think about how long it's going to take you to do things. So what I want you to do is whoever's going to be working on the schedule component and doling out tasks to people, you need to think about what they're doing, but don't think about from today forward. Go to the end and work your way backwards. So if you know that at the end of the semester on this day you have to do a presentation, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to be done, and it's really a good idea to work backwards from that. I'm just telling you from experience. Work backwards from that to get to a really good schedule where you can say, you know what, this is what we have to do. And remember that the schedule that you create, it's not like you got a stone and a chisel and you chisel it in there. A schedule is a guide. It's to help guide your team to the end, and it will change. So I want you to capture those types of changes. I want you to capture those types of things. And it really ought to be a lot of times, manager type, leader type is a person that deals with the schedule, and it probably is the person that should maybe manage those tasks, but everyone needs to help your team lead with that to make sure that you get it right. And we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of things that'll help you. And the only reason why I'm telling you this is that this is not a busy work type of a thing. This is something that's really important that'll help you get done. Because you're going to look at that thing every week and you go, man, that was a really bad idea. There's no way we're going to be able to do that. Because you may have to pardon the phrase, but dumb down part of your project because you may not be able to complete it because of something you ran into. But don't throw that information away. Remember it. Write it down because it's important information, right, for you and your team. You're going to learn. You're going to learn from this a lot of really great things. Okay. So the other thing you need to put into that background is the needs. So you need to start thinking about the functional needs of your system, of your AI. What does it need to do what it's supposed to do, and what are the constraints, right? What are the constraints not only of the system, but different components of the system as well? All right, so now I wanted to shift a little bit from all that mundane stuff and talk a little bit more about some of the ideas. Have you guys already thought of some ideas for your projects? Yes, no? It's okay? No is okay? I know it's still early. Okay, it's all good. So project ideas. So up in green there, you'll see I said pick a domain. So how do you pick an idea for AI? What do I want to do, right? Because you have a huge options to do lots of different things. What's a project that's too big and what's too small? You guys may have to have a brainstorming session and go, hey, why don't we do this or why don't we do that? And the other person needs to go, well, maybe we can't get that done. But the point is, I would suggest having a brainstorming session with your team to flesh that thing out and get it knocked out and figure out what it needs to be. But here are some ways to kind of bound it to help you think about what to do. Pick a domain first. You know, if you have like a special affinity for like physics or biology or chemistry or something you always wanted to know about in a certain domain, but you never had time to go take that class or whatever it was, pick something in a domain that you know something about or maybe even know a little bit about where you have to do some investigation. UAVs. Pick an environment. Think about things you could do if you were building an AI for space, for underwater, for on the water, at home. What things do you walk past at home and go, that's really dumb. You know, I wish there was something that would do that. You know, I talked a little bit about, you know, just when I came in, right? Maybe there's some AI things you can do, right, to do, you know, facial recognition for different types of things. And maybe you could even apply it to an automated way to do roll call. I mean, think about that, right? If you created something like that someone could download as an app on their phone, how many people would buy that? Or how many people would download it for free and sell lots of advertising, right? That'd be a great, I mean, every class in the whole planet would need that. How do I know everybody's here? Take a picture. Done. Right? That might be a cool project. You know, I mean, I just thought of that out of the blue, but, you know, you have a lot of choices, different types of things you can do. Any questions there yet? Nothing? All right. So one of the other things I thought about was think about where your AI could support human needs. Like, that's probably an easy one because you could probably sit down and probably about 10 minutes you can go, and we talked last week about, you know, in Japan how they're building robots to support the elderly, right, to give them comfort as an example. I mean, but think about different types of human needs that need to be solved. Or maybe some that no one's even thought about yet, that you think about. So try to have that knocked out this week if you can. Pick a project, and sometimes it's harder, but it's really important to learn how to do that because at some point in time you got to figure out what it is, and you have to pick something and you got to go with it, right? Because otherwise you could go trying to, you know, analyze it to death and end up, you know, being close to the end of the semester and still not having your idea. So pick something, get together, brainstorm about it with your team, have a Skype session, a Zoom session, whatever, and figure it out. I think you could do it probably in one session. Have all the ideas at least listed and have everybody vote and just decide to go. And you can still change some of the pieces along the way, but have kind of your general idea figured out. But you can kind of use these as a guide kind of to help you think about how to think about what your idea should be. You know, if you're gonna create an AI to cure cancer, that's not going to be better than any project where somebody's back there figuring out how to do an AI with, taking a picture and doing roll call. Okay, I don't, it's you guys have to deal with the project for the whole semester. So pick something that's compelling that you guys want to work on. It's not all about fun, but it is about, you have to be energized enough to do the work because there's work to do, right? So you have leeway to do that. I'm not going to tell you what the project should be. So I think you guys can figure it out. But bound your idea, brainstorm, you flesh it out. Basically what you're doing is when you do that is you're stretching that rubber band really far. You just don't want it to break. So get all that information, collect it all, and then chop it all up and then bring it back together and then figure out what the project needs to be. And go, well, that's a little bit too crazy. Maybe that's a good idea, but maybe we don't do this, or maybe we don't do that. But let's just keep the general idea, right? So do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Brainstorming is a part of every project design with people that are trying to build real, good things. So bound your idea, make it compelling for you, not for me. But remember, you got to sell it to your class. So work on that. Okay, so remember that you're going to need to design 2 sensor interfaces. Pick whatever they are. We talked about it before. And what I'm saying is that a sensory interface, to me, it can be text, right? I mean, we do read. AI systems have to learn how to read too. But just realize that there's components there that you'll have to do. You already know how to do write code to process text type of things when you're parsing systems or XML or what have you. You have to figure out how much data you need. But pick something else out of your comfort zone. Maybe go back and look at the slide that had the memory systems on it, where you had acoustic, or maybe it's voice, or maybe it's some other type of sensor of some kind, where you have to figure out what type of data it provides, and maybe do some work there. Maybe you might have to go do a little bit of research, find a research paper that says, well, here's some really cool. Here, I'll give you an example. So, in biology, they use these things called microarrays, and where they trying to cure cancer. And so, what they're looking for is they use yeast cells on a big glass plate. And then what they do is they put these catalysts in the yeast cells and to try to figure out which of them grow, which yeast cells grow to determine which one potentially is one of those types of catalysts that cause cancer. So as an example, so what they do with that, so if I told you that, how would you go process that information? Well, what they do is they take that microarray and they scan it. So they scan it in a scanner in the lab, and then they have a bunch of software that tries to do interpolation of all the pixels and tries to figure out, well, which one of those black dots is bigger than the other one. And then so it does its analysis, right? And how deep, and sometimes you can do really general analysis because maybe all it has to do is go, okay, that one's bigger. But maybe sometimes it's, how much is that one bigger than, say, one of the other ones? Right? So that's an example of something not in your comfort zone in biology where potentially you could create some kind of system to process that type of information. So think through those type of things. That's an example. Okay. Another idea is, so in AI, we always talk about AI as kind of a singularity, right? It's like a single thing. But maybe your AI is more like an octopus. Octopus has like 8 brains. It has like one big brain and a whole bunch of little brains. And so that's why it can a lot of times do things independently. It's really cool. So, that's right, distributed AI, right? So there's different ways of thinking about it. So anyway, so those are some ideas. The slides, I'll upload these on the site. So hopefully that sparked a little bit of how to get to a concept for your idea that you guys can go to. So my suggestion is have a brainstorming session as early as possible, maybe sometime this week, and knock it out and pick something. And maybe you can use some of these as a guide. Okay? Any questions there? Yeah.
Okay, this is kind of a weird. Have you seen Black Mirror at all?
I have not.
There's like this episode where there's these like AI bees or whatever.
Okay.
Because bees are
Sounds cool already, but
Is
okay.
that like, well, because I didn't know, because it's already been like, well, it's not like a real thing, but it's like in the
It doesn't
TV
matter.
show.
Even if it's something that exists, the one thing I want you to do, what I don't want somebody to do is if you find something that has been created, right? Try not to, because there'll be information on it, right? So try not to use that and just use that as a project. If there's something cool out there and you want to do something else with it, so that you have to still do the research and do some of that cool work, yeah, go do that. That's no problem at all. Especially, like, I mean, I saw your eyes get wider when you talked about it because you think it might be kind of cool. So that's fine. But remember, you got to have, there's 5 or 6 people on your team that have to have the same kind of look in their eyes when they, not completely maybe, right? Because everybody's a little different. But the point is, everyone's got to be a little energized about doing the project. Because they're the ones going to be up at 1 o'clock in the morning typing stuff on their Word document going, I really don't care about this. Right? So anyway, just think through that a little bit. But yeah, you have a lot of leeway to pick some really neat things. So, any other questions? Okay, all right. So do you know what I say when I say swarm, by the way, on this slide? So we talked about the distributed. So swarm technologies are like, so let's say I want to go attack someplace. And I create a whole bunch of UAVs to go do that. Well, it'd be really cool if they could all work together, right? And they all could talk to one another. That's what swarm technology and swarm algorithms all work with, right? You send all these things off and they all interconnect in, a swarm of bees, right? A swarm, ants. However, the swarm technology is all about that interplay of command and control information that goes back and forth to keep everything in sync, right? Everyone's seen videos of how phenomenal ants are, right? In terms of how they, places flood and they all stack themselves on top of one another in the water so that some of them give themselves up for the rest of the hive. You know what I'm saying? But they're all talking, they leave pheromones along the trail and everyone can find where they were, and they can follow paths. I mean, there's lots of really cool things you can do. You can create AIs out of those same types of concepts, right? I don't know if you saw, there was actually an article this week. Do any of you subscribe to Gizmodo or Gizmag? Are you familiar with any of those? Yeah? Which one? You've heard of it? Yeah. So anyway, so this week they were putting little backpacks wired into dragonflies. That basically, they used the little dragonflies as UAVs. They could fly them all around. They can control them. They've been doing research on that for a really long time. So basically, they can do it with cockroaches and all kinds of things, where they can basically use a game controller and basically make them fly around and run around, do whatever they want. So anyway, there's a lot of really neat research going on. But anyway, those are good to kind of see some of the things that are out there. Sometimes you can get some ideas from some of those types of articles as well. So, and they give you alerts every day, obviously, for whatever's new that's coming out. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. So we talked about so what I'm doing is I'm going down through the document, the Word document. Okay. The abstract and the background. Okay. So now we're in the next section. So the next section in that document is your approach. What's the approach you're going to take? What's the methodology you're going to take to put this thing together, right? Tell me how you're going to do it, and why you're doing it that way, and maybe even what research tells you, hey, this is the right way to do this, right? So that's where you have some of your folks going out maybe doing a little bit of research and help defending why you've picked this approach too, right? Create an overview diagram so that there should be like a high-level operational concept of your AI. What does it do, right? And you should have a system view. So when you have the different systems that are in, maybe you have a memory system, you have a cognition system, memory, all those pieces put together. Build me a system view of that in Visio or Is that what you guys normally use for design related, drawing boxes and lines and things for classes? No? Do you have Visio? Everybody? No? What do you use? Just curious. What's that?
Microsoft Paint.
Do you use Paint? Still use Paint? Oh my God. Dude, that's ancient. Even PowerPoint's better than Paint. But anyway, so if you have something like that, try to create the best system view drawings you can. I don't know if does SMU have? Does they give you the whole Microsoft suite of products? Yeah. See if you can figure Visio out. You can do some really cool stuff in it. The problem is that it's it's overkill, right, for a lot of things. But a lot of times it already has the drawing packages in there for different domains. So if you're drawing something, you can just go there and it'll have, the right shapes that you need to put that together. So like if you were doing, I don't know, database design, you go to that section and it's got all the right flow diagram shapes that you need to do your flows. So anyway, that's just a thought. Okay, the really boring one, okay, is the project schedule, but I don't care if you use Microsoft Project, I don't care if you just put it in Excel, but try to have one and try to live by it. It'll really help you get done with the project and get all the things you want to get done. What usually will happen is that you'll get to the end of the project, depending on how well you guys manage your time, you'll get 90% of everything you wanted to get done. So when you get towards the end of your project, you're going to start seeing some things. You're going, well, man, we're not going to be able to get that done. We need it. So the point is, use the schedule wisely. I think it'll help you, but I want to see something in the next class or two where you've put it together at least and tried to carve out who's doing what and when things are due. So the way that works is these are high-level tasks. You don't have to go drill down and figure out, I'm going to move this pencil from one side of the desk to the other. I don't want to see things like that, but the high-level tasks, the things you need to do, it may even be how your document's outlined, right? It might be this person's working on the abstract and this person's working on the methodology, but the reason why the schedule is there because you guys are going to look at that and say, well, you know what? If that person did the abstract, maybe they're better off writing this section next and that person write that. Do you see what I mean? There may be different reasons why you choose certain folks in your group to do different things. So try to use that schedule to help you do that. I think it'll be more of a help than busy work. And again, like I said earlier, work backwards, right, from the end of the semester. Because that's the best way to know that you'll get done. And periodically, go look and go, wow, if I go back, am I really going to get there? Okay. You got 5 or 6 people. Give them some work. So there's going to be some of you in here that are going to be type A's and want to do the whole project yourself. I know what that's like. But dole the work out and get everybody to do the work. And I think you'll come up with some really cool projects. What's really neat about this class is that it's an elective. So we have a lot of leeway to do things in here, and it's going to be pretty neat. You will probably get some more ideas, too, on some things that you can do when Dr. Crowder comes with his AI bugs. Okay, and then references. So have you guys had any classes where they make you give citations for your work? I noticed some of you put it in your homework. Yeah? I see some heads nodding, some not. Not in all classes? Is that a yes or no? Not. Has everyone had at least one class where you had to put citations in like a report or something? Okay. All right. So Google Scholar is one of the best places to get it. I used to live on that site for a long time for a lot of different things. But there's other research papers out there. Creative bibliography at the end. I was going to suggest to have a minimum of 20 different types of literature citations. I think that when you start reading things and start exploring things, you're going to find out that you're going to get it into 20 really fast, because you're going to go, wow, I want to defend why I'm doing this to show how good my research is, or I found this really cool paper, and I found these other 10 papers that were even better. The point is you're going to run into 20 pretty fast, so don't worry about the fact that you won't be able to hit 20, because you will. Okay, so that's the document. So the preliminary. Okay, so let's go back. So on March 10th, right, that Friday before spring break, you'll have an abstract with 150 words. You'll have project description. You'll have figured out what your objectives are, your scope, your needs, your constraints. It doesn't mean that that's not going to change, right? You may we'll go start working through your system and figure out, well, you know what? It really needs this, and it really needs this constraint, because otherwise it's not going to work, right? That's okay, right? It's about getting to the end. Preliminary design is just as important as the end. So then, in that document, you're going to have 2 diagrams inside your methodology and your approach, and you're going to have some words around those, because one of the big things that happens in the commercial world is that when you have to put a proposal into somebody, and you put a picture in a document, that picture better say something, but it doesn't just come off the page and tell what you think it tells another person. So you have to put words around the pictures and say, this object in this picture is here because of this, and it does this, this, and this, and if you go over on the right-hand side of the picture, you'll see this because that's the piece that performs these things, right? You want to talk through and kind of explain what's in your graphic. Don't just drop them into and say, okay, I got it, it's in there. Okay? It's not that hard to do. Those are the 2 pictures that I'd like to see. One's a high-level operational concept, kind of a graphic, and the other one is a system view that has that kind of a block diagram that shows all the systems and subsystems and how they're interconnected. So in that document also, so I want you to put that schedule in there. So that we don't, this is going to be the neat thing about the document. You might have other classes where you have multiple things you have to submit. All that stuff's going in that document. You might have a block diagram in there, or you might have another part of the outline that says schedule, and you'll drop a copy of that Excel spreadsheet in there. Maybe say a little bit of something about it, if you to try to describe a little bit about how you're going to do what you're going to do, and that's all I'm going to be looking for. Now the schedule, it should have when you think about who's doing what, try to think about exactly what the output of that is. Okay, so if you come up with a task, it may be something as simple as say that person's writing the abstract. Well, we know what the output of that is, right? But maybe that output is not that. Maybe, for example, the abstract is just something in just raw text. It's not in the Word document yet, and you want to send it to the whole team to let them review it first before they put it back in the document, right? So figure out what is the exact output from each of the tasks, so that you know what's got to happen next. And if you do it up front and you try to manage it, you do a good job the first time, it'll really help you instead of being something you just have to go back and do all the time. Okay? Use it to your advantage. Okay. I think I beat that dead horse. All right. Okay. So we're at 8:25. You guys doing good? Do you want to keep going? Do you want to take another break? How you guys feeling? I don't see. You're good? All right. All right. That's a good thing. Aren't people falling asleep like last week? That was my fault. Okay. Okay. So the other piece that's in your document is the kind of the initial high-level design. We talked a little bit about it. So this first part ought to be something really easy that you guys know how to do, right? We talked about I talked about last week that some of you, or at least most of you, talked about Scrum in some of your previous classes. Is that true? Right? So one of the most important things when you use the Scrum processes is developing the user stories, right? In the very beginning part of your project. So build your user stories and put them in your document. It's really important. Figure out what your acceptance criteria is. You know, describe. You know, you could even use. I made an example down here. You can act if you. Do you guys have your Java code where it builds your state transition diagrams automatically, right? Where it says this process calls this thing. Where once you write your code, it just drops those out. Well, there's ways to mock that up if you wanted to, right? And it would describe, which actor's doing what. I mean, there's different ways you can describe these things, but you have to describe them. And, some of the we use a tool called a free tool called Redmine, and it's a wiki where we just put all of our user stories for each project we're working in there. We describe them, talk about the the preconditions, the postconditions, all the triggers. So your user stories, they shouldn't be. You'll have some, but it depends, right? It depends on how users are going to use your system. How is your AI going to be used? Let's see. So it looks like a lot of little nitpicky things there, but that's just basically, those are the components of user stories. And if you want to supply a state transition diagram or some kind of a flow diagram that describes your user stories, you can do that. And like I said, you can mock that up. There are tools out there that you can find, free tools online, where you can mock up, state transition type things that are pretty easy to do. That might help you get it done a little bit faster. And then the important thing is, right, if your user uses the system, make sure you map that to your design, right? Make sure that somehow in your document, that this component is in there for a specific reason because it's supporting that user story. Because if it's not there, the system's not going to do what I decided it needed to do, right? And that'll also show you where your gaps are, and you go, oh shoot, I need one of these, right? Okay, so I think when you get into doing it, and if you've done them before, I think those will be relatively quick to get done. My guess is you probably have, five, somewhere in that neighborhood, single-digit numbers of user stories for your system. I'm not saying you have to have 5, right? I didn't just write that in stone. I'm just saying, figure out what your user stories are. If you have 20 or 30, it's probably going a little bit much, but so anyway, just it's your project. Tell me what your user stories are and how it maps to your design. And that suggestion down there, that auto creation, is the one that if you have a way to mock them up in Java, it'll actually generate them for you. Okay. Okay, so when you're creating your when you create your user stories, that's what's going to help you figure out how your system works and what it's going to be used for. But when you figure that out, that's going to tell you what your requirements are, right? So there are different types of requirements, right? Those are the functional things that happen in the system. So there are requirements that talk about what has to be done. There are things that talk about how fast or slow things need to be done. Those are your performance requirements, right? And my guess is that you're probably going to have, at the high. So when I say level 1 system level requirements, what that means is that you're going to have some high level language, right? That basically states what your system does. My system does this. A performance requirement might be my AI system. The AI system shall process data within 10 seconds. That's a performance requirement. Okay. You have interface requirements. This component, or not this component, think about it at a high level though. You have requirements that you have to state that something has to be done. Interface requirements, pretty obvious. I've got two components, two pieces of systems that have to talk to one another. You have to say that. My system shall have a component that does this, that talks to another system that does this, right? That's an interface requirement. You might have some safety requirements, right? We talked about trust and safety, right? If I want to make sure that my AI doesn't run amok, there's probably some requirements that I have to give to the system to make sure that it doesn't run amok. So there might be some safety or some quality, or maybe even some reliability things you might want to build in, right? Maybe you have some redundancy built into your system, right? Maybe you got redundant power because it has to survive or whatever it is that it's doing. So, and you probably have. I'm not giving you a requirement to make sure that you have 20 in there. I'm just saying that's probably a good number because you might have a few of each type. And you could easily, if you went through that list there and even thought of other ones that you wanted to have as part of your system, you could easily come up with 3, 4, 5 requirements for each of those types that are going to help you define what your system's going to do. And when you do that towards the beginning, it really helps you kind of define what your system's going to do. And you can go back and change them, right? But the point is, write them down, figure out what your system, it'll help you draw your box around what you're actually doing. And which is what your constraint requirements are, right? Those are the ones that are going to tell you what are the constraints that your system has, what are the limitations that it has, or what is the limitations, or what is the boundary it has to remain in. You know, maybe your AI only works in the laundry room, right? I mean, I'm just making that up, whatever it is, right? Maybe there's, that's a high level requirement that says, you know, which means that if if my system only works in the laundry room, if I take that a step further and I say, well, how does my AI going to know that it's in a laundry room? Well, maybe it's got to detect what a dryer looks like. I don't know. Maybe it's got to detect where the door is, right? And then go, oh, can't go there. That's a door. I can't walk out. I'm not allowed out of the laundry room, right? So the point is, your requirements, when you start figuring out what your user stories are, right away you're going to figure out what your system's going to be doing. You'll figure out what your requirements are for that thing. Okay. All right, we talked about the Visio. I don't care. If you like Paint, use Paint. Whatever works for you. Okay, so that bullet underneath there, I stole that from the other slide from last week. It says minimum set of components. There's no minimum set of components. You guys know what your components need to be for what you're building, okay? The point is that you know you're going to need some kind of data stores of some kind. You're going to need some kind of an ETL system or memory system, and you have to choose those two different types of inputs. So you need to describe what you're doing there in your preliminary design. Remember what a preliminary design is. Preliminary design is basically shaping what's going to happen next, right? So you're starting high level and you're going, I'm going to need one of these to solve this problem, to do these things, right? So you're scoping out what that design is going to do, and then your detailed design is you're going to flesh it out a little bit more, dive a layer a little bit deeper, and start to dig around in there and figure out what your AI does down into the covers. So think of those as examples for components, right? Your object store, your ETL components, your memory systems, your sensor types, your processing system for your sensors, what components have to be in there. And the thing that I'd like you to do is to, in the words, when you put your design in there, I want you to defend why those components are there. I'd like you to write in your prose basically why the component is in there, what function it performs, defend it, right? So I'll tell you why. That's actually kind of a pet peeve of mine. I'll tell you why. Today, when people get requirements from customers to go build a system, we go pick the best software and hardware we can find, we look at the requirements, and we go build it. But what happens is that there's no one in there, there should be, but there's no one in there that constantly monitors all the pieces that people are putting in there that engineers think must be in the system to perform that, to make that thing work. And many times, it's 1,000 things that no one needed to solve that problem. It may be, you know, if they would only use those 10 things, they could have still solved the problem without those extra 100 things. And that's because, and that's a software problem too. So I'll give you an example. And it's important to building AI systems because they're complex, right? So in all of your software classes, since the very first day you started down this path, you've learned how to build, I don't know, 20, 30 different types of diagrams, state transition diagrams, data flow diagrams, all kinds of diagrams. Why can't we just have one diagram that explains it all? How come, and even with all those diagrams, if I asked you a question, the software that you wrote in this class that performed this function, if I asked you a question, if that function breaks, what else fails in your system? You can't tell me that. Definitely not off the top of your head. You can say, yes, Professor, I can go back and look at my code and I can tell you what will break. But the point is, think about if the software knew all of its dependencies internally, right? It could heal itself if there was a problem. You wouldn't have to go back and find the bug. The software could fix itself. But it doesn't know all the dependencies. And all we do is draw lots of great diagrams to explain the software to somebody else. But if we knew what all those dependencies were in the software ahead of time, or we built it that way from the ground up, we'd be able to do that. We'd be able to build software in much better ways. But that's not how we build them today, because that's the way we used to build them before. But now, right, things are so much more complex. There's so much more information. We've got to change the way that we do things to make the systems that we build better. They got to be more autonomous. They got to think more. And the way we've done it before just isn't going to cut it. So that's why I just want you to defend why you got that box in there. Say, I need that box. Why do you need that box? Okay? Okay. So this is that diagram I put up earlier. And I put this up here because I thought it'd be a really good idea. And I put these questions up here to help you think about what boxes you think you might need in your system. So your whole AI system's there in the middle. You got your brain in the center there, your cognitive neural framework, whatever pieces you think you need. And these are things that you realize that you're going to learn some of these things throughout your class, right? So you know that there are components that we still have to talk about. But I'm trying to give you enough information to keep going, and I think you have a good set of data already. So one thing to think about. So let's start on the left part of the slide. What are your AI's data sources? What are the data collectors, right? What are the pieces of software you need to collect the information? What piece of software do you need to parse the information? What components in your system you need to pull the pieces out of that data that your system cares about, right? What are your what metadata? You know, what format are you going to use for your data that's coming in, so your rest of your system can understand it? What are your AI data loaders? So data loaders are once the data comes into the system, once it's processed, you got to figure out where to go put it. Sometimes it goes to a database, sometimes it goes to another system to get processed, then goes to another system to get processed, and then maybe it ends up in the database. So figure out what those need to be. So moving to the right across the top, what are your sensory systems, right? What sensors did you pick? What components do you need to process that sensor data? what type of intelligent agents do you need to have in a system? Are there, have you guys had any classes on microservices? Does that sound familiar? We'll call those really tiny processes that do something really discrete and specific, okay? So an intelligent agent is a really cool name for a tiny little process that does something really specific. So basically, if you think about, you know, how there's some people write these really huge programs and the whole thing is in one big routine, right? Not a really good way to write it, right? But so if you think about how, you know, you have a bunch of things that have to perform specific functions in your, just like if you have an injury, right? You have a whole bunch of cells and a whole bunch of things that happen to go heal that injury as fast as possible. It may take you know, something away from somewhere else and to go down to where the injury is to help solve it, to help solve that problem, right? To heal that injury. Well, in a system, you have these intelligent agents that run around, these small, discrete little processes that are built for very, very specific things that solve problems. Which types of intelligent agents might you need in your system? That's all that's saying, right? And maybe they're like the little ants that we talked about. Each ant has a specific job, right? One is to go find breadcrumbs, you know, whatever, right? Another, all of them have their little jobs in a thing, just like inside of a system, just like in our bodies. What type of memory systems you're going to use, right? We talked about short-term, long-term, raw data, acoustic. You know, what kind of memory system you're going to put in there? What is the component you're going to use, or what set of components you're going to use that are going to help you determine the weighting of your relationships? So, right, you're going to have a data store of some kind, right? But now you're going to start deciding. So I think I gave this example last week, but I'm going to do it again. So if I run a query from Google, I put a set of words in there. There's some of those words that are important because it ties those other words together, and some of the words that are the actual topic of what I'm looking for may be more important than the others. So if I took that, well, they can't see me, but try to write as big as I can. So let's think of that. There's a sentence there, right? A phenotypic array. I don't even know what that was the first time I read that. Okay, but if that's what I'm looking for in Google, right? Something in the system takes these and it chops these up and it tries to figure out what's important, right? Well, when I'm creating these relationships, and maybe if I'm trying to parse a sentence structure, I'm trying to create weights, or I'm trying to make my system understand what is more important, this letter A may be a little bit less important than maybe what phenotypic, because that's describing exactly what type of array, right, that I have. And maybe this weighted relationship here between these things are different. Or maybe, you know, this weighting here is a little stronger than this weight here, for example. So the point is, in your system, no matter what you're doing, whether it's text or let's say I've got a quadrant of pixels, right? Maybe I'm looking for all red pixels. Well, these things will probably be more important than these two, right? And somehow I have to define what that is in my database. But I may not use the same thing, because if I'm talking about biology related things, maybe I care that there's some kind of whatever waveform or whatever function I'm going to use that's going to define what that weight is that's different from this, right? because maybe there's some kind of different mathematical relationship that I want to use because I'm interpolating a bunch of pixels that I might use differently. So anyway, figure out what weighting you're going to use and what components in your system are going to have to do what. Okay, and then the last thing, on the very far, on the bottom, it says, does your AI actuate anything? So we've talked a whole lot about, or I've talked a whole lot about, data and information coming into your system, but we didn't talk about, well, does your AI do anything? So if it has to actuate something, are there components in your system that make it, I don't know, does it walk? Does it have wheels that have to turn? Does it have a controller in it? What components in your system do? Does it have to talk back to you? What does it do? Does it flap its wings? When you get mad at it or something? I don't know. What does it do? Figure that out and figure what type of components you need in your system, right? And I keep saying this word components, right? They are. When I say components, I'm a software person and I think about software. So I know that if it's a big piece of software or a little piece of software, it's all a component. They're just different sizes, right? But somehow you want to try to call out in your system, you're trying to describe, remember, coming back, jumping back to the high level, you're trying to describe to your team and to everybody else in the room and to me what your system does. So those components should reflect that. Okay. So the final document, still haven't figured out how to deal with that reading day, which is still really weird. But you guys can help me with that, and as we get a little closer to that, we can figure that out. I don't care that much about when, I want to give you as much time to make your projects as good as they can be. So, because the idea of the project is to help you guys learn how to do it and to enjoy the fact that you actually got it done when you're finished. So in the final document, you're essentially, from the time period where you turn in your preliminary design until you turn in your final design, you're making changes to the document. You're adding new pieces to it, modifying the old ones, and you're iterating through it where you might even change the title, towards the very end. But as long as the title and the abstract and all the pieces in it, right, all come together, right, that's really what you want. You want a nice comprehensive thing. It's not like, well, preliminary design, done. Don't ever need to see that anymore. It's your project. So the preliminary design just feeds all the detailed design. So you're going to be editing, adding a few other things. So what's in the final? And not the final, but in the final detailed design. So there's a section in that research paper outline template I gave you that has a results section. So at the very end, you're going to describe, well, hey, I started out building this design, and I found that these things happened, and what you're going to talk about is your results from the research, from creating that design. What might you have discovered that might make your design better? What do you think? Maybe even do an analysis of it to figure out what you think you could have done better, right? All of those things are important to put in a results section of a paper like that. So the other thing that'll be in your final design is you're going to do a data flow analysis through your system. So I think I've used the word components about 1,000 times. So, but in between all those components, there are some little lines that connect them all. And there's data that flows throughout all your systems for it to do everything. Well, you're going to basically, do your data flow diagrams. You're going to tell me the frequency of the data, right? How often, you're going to do an analysis of how data flows through your system. And you're going to describe that. And as we go through some of the next classes, we'll figure that out. But it's really not that hard to do. Okay. If you have two pieces of software, you know how often a message gets sent. You know how much data is in that message, right? You know why it gets sent. Those are the type of things you do in data flow analysis. But in the end, why do you do that? You do it because you need to figure out whether or not it's right for your system, for your AI. So you may do the analysis and go, I got to add something, forgot something here, right? Or because, as an example, this happens quite a lot, by the way. People create visualization tools, and they'll start pushing all kinds of data to it, and they'll say, well, that's just software, right? It just takes it, and it's going to take it, it's going to put it on screen. Well, it runs out of memory, and it dies. It crashes. Well, shoot, I guess what I need to do is I need to take all that data and then create a little caching section to cache that content so that the visualization doesn't die, right? So that's why you do data flow analysis. And then you're going to do some really cool complexity analysis. So you're going to say, this guy's really weird. Complexity analysis is boring. But anyway, I'm going to show you some things so you can figure out how to deal with ambiguity in AI here. We might get to some of it. I might do more of it next week. And at the end of the document, you have your conclusions. You're going to, where you can talk about, and then there's a next steps section that should be in there that'll say what could you do to improve your design? What could others do to make it even better? Maybe if we had an AI class after this one, maybe we'd build one. Maybe you'd take the best one from the class, and all of you'd get together and build one, and each of you would do a different piece of it. That would be really cool. But anyway, that's just an idea. Okay. But so talk about the next steps on what you might do to improve it or to make it better. Okay. Yeah, I'm really stuck on that Visio, huh? So some of the system view diagrams we already talked about earlier. But when you start doing the complexity analysis, you'll figure out what, do you guys know what design matrices are? You ever seen one? No? Okay. You'll see some here in a second. It's really not a big deal. But it helps a lot. Data flow diagrams, I know you know what those are. So you'll have some of those in the finalized design. And again, so the document's already laid out, right? Background, methodology, approach. And then, right, when you get past the approach, all of these detailed design things, that's where all those are going to go, right? So just to kind of put it in perspective. Anybody have any questions at all about any of this stuff yet? By the way, I've gotten a number of emails this week I responded to already. So if you have questions about this thing, anytime, send me an email. I stay up way too late, and I have to get up early anyway. So I always have those two phones glued to me somewhere. So I'll usually answer. So if you got a problem and you're up late studying or whatever, just send an email. You might get an answer, even late. So don't worry about that. Do you know what I'm saying when I say metadata schemas? I want to see the schemas. Okay, what I'm saying there is that similar to what we talked about earlier, when you push data between two parts of your system, you have to format it the right way. Well, just like a database schema, right, that defines how you're going to store something. Well, it's basically an XML-like schema that basically describes what information you're going to be bringing into your system and what you're storing, etc. So I want to see those. There may not be many, but you may maybe only have two for your data sources, but you may have more inside your system. So we talked about the two sensor types. If somebody has a wild hair and they really want to do more, that's fine too, but just make sure you think you can get it done. Again, I'm harping on the weighted relationships. So Those are important. Okay, so I've explained a little bit about what extract, transform, load is, and here I just describe it. I've already explained it, so I think you already know what I mean when I say it. When I say each of these, extract, transform, load, but you have them here so you can go back and look at them if you need them, because I'll post them all up onto Canvas. So when I say transform, though, that's the one I'll call out a little bit on this slide. So when you bring in data into a system and you transform it, a lot of times you just write a piece of code or a Python script or something to take a piece of data, out of it and maybe send it to another piece of software. An example for a Java transformer is it's one that we've written in the past a couple of times, where essentially you just take in XML and an XSLT style sheet. Have you guys ever done anything like that? Have you guys ever used XSLT in anything? Yeah? All right. See, I don't know what you know and what you don't, since I haven't taught in the computer science department, so just take me with a grain of salt and say, hey, we already know how to do that. You can not have to tell us that. So, but basically, transform your content. That's an example of a transformer you can write, which is basically you could take data of almost any kind into it and use a style sheet to process it. Okay, that horse is dead too. All right, so I created this complexity module. So we got about, I don't know, I'd say 10-15 minutes. It's almost 9 o'clock. What I'm going to do is, I think what we'll do is I'll just introduce this. We'll go through just a couple of and then we'll finish the rest of it up next week. How's that sound? You get out of here a little bit early today? Fair enough? Okay, because I know you have nothing else to do, right? All right. So we had the definitions on complexity last week that you all turned in, and everybody did a really good job of trying to figure out what that was. And there's not really a whole lot out there, and there's only a few people that really deal with it a lot in the type of domain that they're in. A lot of it's in like mechanical engineering, is where a lot of the real complexity analysis is done. People that have to build airplanes, spaceships, right? And they actually have to work, right? People can't die. So there's a lot of complexity in those things. So they deal with this, have dealt with this problem for a really long time. So the aims of this complexity module is basically to describe how you measure it, how you understand it, and it's from a functional view. How you identify. When you look at something, you know, oh yeah, that's that type of complexity. I know what that is, and I know how to solve that problem. Quantify it, and try to reduce it so that your systems are more optimal, right? And I'm going to talk about how to do all those things. Okay, bunch of cool pictures up on the right. So there's many different types of, when we design a lot of different types of systems, there's a lot of different ways that people deal with complexity. So there's a thing called axiomatic design, which is what is in that book at the back there. It describes how to do axiomatic design. That works really well for like mechanical engineering type things. It doesn't quite work as well for software things, but it does if you use it initially, because if you iterate through it 2 or 3 times, it really helps you figure out what, once you figure out what your requirements are to help you map to your design components that you need, it helps you do that a lot. So this picture on the right, you can tell it kind of looks like a house, and they coined it a long time ago. They call it the house of quality kind of a diagram. It comes from a whole series of a whole class on something called quality functional deployment. And basically all it's doing is, if you look down on the side, on the left side, you'll see somebody's got a bunch of requirements, and then across the top it says, here's what I'm doing to satisfy that requirement. And it's a matrix, right? So what happens? There are little X's and big X's that pop up in there, and then what you do is you go across that diagram, what it's supposed to help you do is help you define which of those things at the top help solve the requirements, and if I need anything else or how well I solve that requirement, maybe I need to add additional components. And so what happens, your matrix will start populating, and supposedly it'll help you give you a better insight into your design. I'm just trying to give you these. You're not going to have to do all these. I just want you to know about them, that they exist, and why they exist. So the other little diagram on the bottom there is called the Taguchi design method, or a robust design method. And what it describes is that if you have a process that's in your system and you want to try to understand what's affecting certain things, it helps you figure out like like one of the arrows coming on the top you'll see is the noise, and basically it's another method for trying to understand things that affect your design that you may not even know are affecting it. So it helps you think through the process, and all of these tools are just tools to help you think through your process of designing stuff. Okay? And by the way, if you hadn't noticed, there's no homework for next week. But I am going to put that 10 or 15 question quiz out there, and that'll essentially be the homework for next week that y'all will do. And it'll be over, probably over those first 15 slides from last week. Okay. So complexity. So we need to work through and understand how to decompose decompose all the complexity in our system. So think about the fact that heat engines were built before the laws of thermodynamics were really understood, right? There's a lot of things that we've done before we fully understood everything about that domain, right? So if we can, so as we go through and figure out all the details of those heat systems over time, wow, we built them a whole lot better, didn't we? Maybe 10 or 20 years later. So the objective is we can do the same thing with AI, right? We can do the same thing with complexity. If we can formulate it, we can figure out what it is and understand it a little bit better, then we'll be able to build these AI systems a lot better and faster. Same concepts. Is that a good design? I don't know. I don't like it because I can't get the milk from the outside. I mean, the point is, right, how do you determine what is good design, right? It's about the functional things that it has to do. So we got to have a criteria. How do you know if something's a good design? So axiomatic design, as an example, is a mechanism that helps you identify what good design is. Because if you have, as you'll see here shortly, if you have things that are kind of tied together that could be independent, your design gets a lot better because things aren't as coupled together, right? There's not as much, not as much coupling going on in the system. So there's a guy that wants to just go design it, right? No requirements needed. I know what I need. I'm just going to go build a thing. It doesn't work. It does if I have to, design something really simple, but anything more than that, you usually leave stuff out. All right. Okay. What's important on here? So one thing that happens a lot is engineers, we over-engineer stuff a lot. And we under-engineer things and both of those things happen when somebody doesn't fully understand two things. What does the customer really want? And when somebody gives me a sentence that calls it a requirement, I can have two people that read that same sentence that think something completely different. I can think of at least 3 religions right, that are out there that read the same book. We talked about that last week. Because they read the same thing differently. So same thing. That's why requirements are really important, how you write them, make sure they're concise and succinct. And that's why we over-design and under-design. It's just a fact of life. Words are ambiguous by their nature. They just are. So the more you can flesh the design out, the more you can figure out what's really going on, what a customer really wants, the better your design is going to be. But how do you do it, right? You got to have a way to do that. So when you flesh out the requirements, when you flesh out the user stories, when you flesh out the schedule, when you flesh out your design and figure out what your components are and your constraints, all of those things can take a really complex system that's really hard to build, and you go, boom, I know how to build that. That's the way it works. So, and axiomatic design is one of those tools that can help do that. So, why complexity? Why did I even say that? I don't even know what that means. So, complexity is everywhere, right? It's in engineering, economics, politics, lots of different places. So one of the major things we're trying to do is reduce complexity. So we want to understand what causes it. And there's a whole great deal of confusion, as we saw with the answers in the homework, in terms of what complexity really means. So I'll tell you this, that you could get a whole bunch of scientists in a room all at the same time, and exactly what happened on the homework is exactly what would happen in that room. They'll all give you a different definition of what complexity is, because they don't know how to deal with it to build systems. So issues related to how complex things are. Why is something complex? Why is something that we thought was complex before, but then when we figured it out, it's not complex anymore, right? That's what this design type of process helps you do. Is it even a good idea to reduce complexity in a system? I don't know, it depends on your system. I mean, intuitively, you'd say, yeah, that's a great idea. So how do you do it? So let's say you had to control the flow rate and the temperature of the water in this faucet. Is it complex to do that? I don't know. So let's look at it. So if the task is to control the flow rate based on what you see on the slide, does that make it complex if you know exactly what the temperature needs to be and what the flow rate needs to be? Well, if you have requirements that where the flow rate is dependent on the temperature, right? Those are coupled. Those two things are together. That makes your system more complex than if you didn't care and the flow rate didn't depend on the temperature. Do you understand? But if you didn't do the analysis and find out that the flow rate did depend on the temperature, right? You would build a system that didn't work correctly based on the requirements of what you were trying to do. Does that make sense? All right. So that's kind of a simple example, but that's just one example of where you can see some discrete dependency in a system. Now, what I'd want to do is well, let's just keep going. So there's different types, different definitions for complexity, right? There's computational complexity. There are different types of algorithms they're different level of complexity, and some people just, there's a lot of confusion, right? Some people say, well, that's just complicated. It's not complex, right? Those are different things, right? There are lots of different types of definitions for complexity. So here's really the key, or one of the keys. So when in the past, the way it's worked is people have always been trying to figure out the complexity in terms of the physical things. I look at that. That's complex, right? Not from the functional domain, not from the internal, the way things function. Yeah, dealing like we just talked about, the flow rate versus the heat, right? That's within the functional domain. That has to do something, right? It's not like, well, I look at that airplane and I go, that's complex. It's not the same thing. It's about how the functions are tied together that I have to understand to make it either less complex than it is, or figure out if it's important for me to go fix it. So that's the difference. So it's all this work that we're doing is in the functional domain, never in the actual physical domain. That's a key component for figuring out how you deal with complexity. So complexity is defined as the measure of uncertainty and satisfying the functional requirement. That's really the key. And in the book, one of the great things that he calls out in there is that he says that the level of complexity deals with the amount of information content you have. We already talked about the information continuum and how the further you go and the more information you have, the more complex it gets. Here's another real quick example. So the economic growth of a nation, that appears to be really complex, right? You have all those factors that I cited down underneath there. But you have to, so if I have to increase the gross domestic product of the country at the rate of our population, or I have to have a maximum employment rate at the same time that has to be maintained so that we have a stable country, and at the same time I've got to keep inflation in check at the same time so that we have economic stability. How do you do that? Well, here's really the problem, right? There are all these different branches of government that we have. They have to develop policy to satisfy all those functional requirements at the same time. But yet each department does something completely different. So how do I if I could come up with a way, right, to figure out write those functional requirements down, figure out what design parameters I needed to make sure that each of those were understood and understood all the dependencies, just like the system we talked about before that we don't usually understand, all the dependencies and all the software. That would probably really improve those processes and maybe really improve the kinds of policies that people potentially would put in place. So that's an example of looking at the functional components and the functional pieces inside of something to figure out how they're tied together and how complex they are. All right. A normal probable PDF, no big deal there. But the point is that when you're building these designs, when you're building your AI system, right, those functional requirements that you guys are going to write down, you know when they're satisfied when what you're designing, what your design range fits inside of your system range. And when it fits inside of your system range, you know that you've satisfied that requirement. So the example is, did I have the example here? No. Where is that example? I took it out. Doggone it. Okay. So let's say I've got an automobile in the shop, and I'm trying to soup it up, and I want to get it, I want to add 100 horsepower to it, right? And I know that if I drew that PDF, I know that since my objective is 450 horsepower and it's not there now, I know that what I've got designed right now in the system, right, is not within the system range because it's not my functional requirement says it needs to be at 450 horsepower. So maybe it's not at 450 horsepower because I've got a pipe I've got to cut. The tolerance is maybe not good enough, and maybe air is coming out where it's not supposed to, right? So when I change those parameters and I make that design range fit inside the system range, I know I've satisfied that functional requirement. Now, that is the same exact type of a process that is not done today for most systems that we build, that when you use it, it'll help you figure out whether or not, it'll help you actually make your system less complex because now you actually understand what it's going to do. It's in the functional domain. You know what it's supposed to do, and you know that if it doesn't do that, right, it's not in your system range. Whether it's a pipe or a software requirement for an AI system that's supposed to go walk somewhere, that has some performance requirement that you gave it. So when you start doing these, you'll start seeing the the differences. Now, are you going to have to generate, 800 or 25 of these PDFs? No. This is to describe basically how you can understand your system better than we do. Okay? And it's 9:15, and I think we're gonna keep it here today. Stop it here. Is that all right? Okay. Is that a little bit better than last week? All right. Okay. Do you know of anybody that has figured out what they want to do yet on their project? Huh? No? All right. So you guys are going to brainstorm between now and next week and come up with a project idea and make people vote. Okay? Ashley, make people vote on your teams, whoever the leaders are of the teams, make people vote and then just pick something and go with it. All right? Yeah, I am. I'll put them up there when I go home. Or maybe in the morning when I get up. But I'll put them out there. Because you guys are probably going to sleep too, right? Or do other homework? Okay. Let's see.
You're like, don't have money.
Yeah, it's a little early on.
All right.
You have 16.
Oh,
But I got
is that
years, yeah.
Yeah.
that sign-in sheet?